Senator Bernie Sanders, joined by several Democratic colleagues on Thursday, unveiled three bills to lower prescription drug prices, part of a new push from progressives to act on the issue. The people of our country pay by far not even close the highest prices in the world for the prescription drugs that they need, Sanders said at the press conference. That has got to end, and the legislation that we are supporting will do just that. Senator Cory Booker joined Sanders along with other Democrats at the press conference. Both Booker and Sanders are potential 2020 presidential contenders. Booker has previously come under criticism from some progressives for not being strong enough on drug pricing. But on Thursday, Booker spoke out in strong language, attacking the outrageous and unjustifiable high cost of prescription drugs. The bills unveiled Thursday would allow importation of cheaper drugs from Canada, allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices, and strip monopolies from drug companies if their prices were above the average price in other wealthy countries. All those items are strongly opposed by the pharmaceutical industry and face little if any chance of getting through Congress, especially with Republicans in control of the Senate. But backers said they hoped President Trump would give a boost to their legislation, given that he has rallied against drug companies. Today I say to President Trump, if you're serious about lowering prescription drug costs in this country, support our legislation and get your Republican colleagues on board. Sanders also said he hopes to raise pressure on Senate GOP leadership to act on drug prices by having House Democrats first pass legislation. These guys in the House are going to give us something, and now our Republican colleagues here are going to have to tell their constituents back home why they do not support common sense legislation to lower the cost of prescription drugs. I would not have been made aware of this story were it not for Bernie's YouTube account posting the press conference. It's 30 minutes in length. He speaks for about 4 or 5. But one point that I found those things you kind of take away and they stick out to you above anything else said by these various people that you watch. He mentions John Martin, this CEO, who manufactured a pill for hepatitis C, and the price for the pill was $1,000, and the production to manufacture it was $1. And I actually was able to pull up a story where they said the same pill that cost $1,000 over here supposedly goes for $4 in India. And I see an issue like this where we're talking about increasing the price of an item, sometimes twice as many, 3 times, any number you can think of. And having that be completely ignored by CNN, Fox, MSNBC, the whole host of others, in favor of discussing a government shutdown that everyone's already made their mind up about, everybody already knows, or at least it has convinced themselves they know the full story of, is it's really a failure of Americans as far as the ones that are on top and have the power to control what these various news organizations choose to report and focus on. In truth, I can understand where a story like this would not get that many views or interest, but I recommend that press conference because you're going to see Sanders and many of the other people rattle off their different experience and say things I think are very relevant to the discussion here. You had Elijah Cummings mention speaking to Trump about a year and a half ago in his first year, and talking about the seriousness of this topic, only to receive no responses or any updates again in almost 2 years after the meeting. And I would paint that more as going to the lack of charisma, or rather the lack of empathy that you could attach to people at the top. I don't care about the cost of your healthcare as long as the pharmaceutical companies give me, money. Which that's why it was surprising to see Booker up there during the press conference. We all remember his January 2017 vote against Bernie's bill that was supposed to lower prescription drug costs, and then we found out he was taking over $200,000 from the pharmaceutical companies. So it was a big shock to see him, now try to seem convinced that this is problematic. But when people want to run for president, they tend to change their stripes. It's all the more confusing as to how you can go and you can spread this story around. I can tell people about it, but we still have individuals that are very active on social media that will maybe see this, maybe not, who have convinced themselves if someone is poor in the US, it's all their fault. There's nothing about the system being broken. Like if you can't figure out where there's a problem with a guy charging someone $1,000 for a pill that costs $1 to make, which is what John Martin did, and you'd see that in that press conference. I'm gonna link it below. I don't know what else to tell you. And that's when those are the too far gone. See, the mistake people make when they engage others, I think, is that we always try to come at it from the perspective of, oh, I can maybe change this person's mind, maybe tell them something they've never heard before. And I used to follow that same doctrine, but when I go around and I mention statistics, 76% of Americans live in paycheck to paycheck. I've had people say that I'm unfairly blaming Trump for that, but here's how the blame goes. If I say that the lack of being able to afford medicine is a factor in that circumstance, I would then say the president choosing to completely negate any attempt to fix this or do something about it is also a factor. And again, to his credit, he's not the person who started it. He's not the person who is at the center of why it's so problematic or why it's this way. But you can't tell me the most powerful man in the world is unable to do anything about this. But again, that goes against the tribalist Republican narrative that everyone who has problems now is only screwed because of, whatever thing they can think of. So this bill won't pass, but it still is something that needs to be focused on. And I hate that, I can rattle off a couple of statistics. I can talk about a couple of things that are you might not think to yourself. But one of the other topics I mentioned is that the minimum wage in the U.S., which is slightly above $7, and really square that up with having to pay for groceries, utilities such as housing and electricity, water, all these different bills, and then your drug prices. When you start adding all those things together, it really, if again, objectively speaking, does not seem to be that hard to figure out why we need a minimum wage increase, why we need people to actually make something that allows them to survive in a system that is dominated by douchebag CEOs trying to squeeze as much pennies for themselves as possible. Same thing at Amazon. So thank you.